The stagecoach lurched violently, throwing Clara Bellamy against the worn leather seat. Outside, the Kansas prairie had long since given way to the unforgiving terrain of the Colorado Territory. Red rocks jutted from the earth like broken teeth, and the November wind howled through the mountain passes with a fury that made her pull her thin wool shawl tighter. Clara pressed her gloved fingers against the letter in her pocket, the one that had brought her to this desolate place. Boone Riker's handwriting had been bold and demanding. Even in courtship, a strong woman needed for a strong land. He'd written, "No place for the weak-minded or delicate." She'd answered his advertisement not out of romantic notions, but out of desperation. A widow at 24, childless and penniless. She'd had few choices left in Topeka. The coach driver's shout pierced the wind. "Riker Ranch ahead!" Through the frost-covered window, Clara glimpsed her new life, a sprawling compound of log buildings nestled against the base of a massive cliff. Smoke curled from multiple chimneys, and she could make out the shapes of men moving between the corrals. Everything looked gray. The sky, the buildings, even the snow-dusted ground. The coach rolled to a stop in the yard, and Clara forced herself to step down, her legs stiff from 2 days of travel. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. She'd thought Kansas winters were harsh, but this mountain air had teeth. "You the mail order bride?" Clara turned to find a weathered man in his 50s, his face like old leather beneath a battered hat. Not Boone. She'd seen his photograph. "I'm Clara Bellamy," she managed through chattering teeth. "Mister, Riker is expecting me." The man grunted and grabbed her single trunk from the coach. "Name's Silas. I run the hands here. Boss is up at the main house." He jerked his chin toward the largest building, a 2-story structure of dark logs that seemed to absorb what little light the winter afternoon offered. Clara followed Silas across the frozen yard, noting the men who stopped their work to stare. She kept her eyes forward, her spine straight despite the trembling in her limbs. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness invited predators. The house's heavy door opened before they reached it, and Clara got her first look at Boone Riker in the flesh. He was bigger than his photograph suggested, tall and broad-shouldered, with iron-gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. His face might have been handsome once, but years of wind and sun had carved deep lines around his mouth and eyes. There was no warmth in his expression as he assessed her. "You're smaller than I expected," he said by way of greeting. "And prettier. That could be trouble." Clara didn't know how to respond, so she said nothing. Boone's eyes narrowed slightly, as if her silence was a test she'd passed. "Bring her things to the blue room, Silas," Boone ordered. Then, to Clara, "Come, I'll show you the house." The interior was as cold and imposing as the exterior. Dark wood paneling covered the walls, and heavy furniture squatted in rooms lit by inadequate lamps. The place smelled of leather, tobacco, and something else. Loneliness, perhaps, or the absence of any feminine touch for too long. "Kitchen," Boone said, pointing to a doorway. "You'll be expected to help Cookie with meals when needed. Parlor, my study, you don't enter without permission. Your room is upstairs." He led her up a narrow staircase, his boots thundering on each step. The blue room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the corrals. Clara's trunk already sat at the foot of the bed. "Supper's at 6, Boone said from the doorway. "We'll marry end of the week. Judge comes through on Friday. Questions?" Clara turned from the window. "May I ask, that is, what are the rules here?" Something flickered in Boone's eyes. Approval, maybe, or calculation. Smart to ask. Rules are simple. You do as you're told. You don't wander the ranch alone. You don't fraternize with the hands, especially not Eli Ward. Man's got Indian blood and ideas above his station. You keep to the house and the kitchen garden. You fulfill your wifely duties without complaint. Break my rules, and you'll find I'm not a patient man. The threat hung in the air between them, unsubtle as a raised fist. Clara had lived with such threats before. She nodded once. "Good." Boone's gaze traveled over her again, possessive already. "Wear something nicer for supper. First impressions matter." He left, closing the door with a finality that made Clara sink onto the bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear the sounds of the ranch, men calling to each other, horses neighing, the creak of leather and wood. She was trapped again, just as she'd been in Topeka. Only now there was nowhere to run. The mountains pressed in on all sides, and winter was coming fast. She unpacked slowly, hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe. As she worked, she gazed out the window at the men moving below. Most were typical ranch hands, rough, weathered, focused on their work. But one caught her attention, tall and lean. He moved with an unusual grace as he led a string of horses toward the barn. Something about his posture, the careful way he handled the animals, set him apart. As if sensing her gaze, the man looked up, even from a distance. Clara could see he was younger than most of the others, with dark hair that fell past his collar. Their eyes met for just a moment before Clara stepped back from the window, her heart pounding. She didn't need trouble. And Boone's warning echoed in her mind, especially not Eli Ward. At 6 o'clock sharp, Clara descended to the dining room. She'd changed into her best dress, brown wool with small pearl buttons, modest but well-made. Boone sat at the head of a long table, and he nodded approvingly when he saw her. "Better," he said. "Sit." The meal was served by Cookie, a grizzled man who wouldn't meet Clara's eyes. Beef, potatoes, bread, hearty fare that sat heavy in her nervous stomach. Boone ate in silence, occasionally watching her over his fork. "You were married before," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes, my husband died 2 years ago." "How?" Clara set down her fork carefully. "Fever took him." The lie came easily. She'd told it so many times she almost believed it herself. The truth, that drink and rage had finally stopped James's heart, was not something she'd ever speak aloud. "No children?" The question hit like a blow, but Clara kept her face neutral. "No." "That'll change." Boone's tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing cattle breeding. "A ranch needs sons." Clara nodded, unable to trust her voice. Outside, wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled. The sound raised goosebumps on her arms. She'd left one kind of wilderness for another, trading the empty bottle for the empty land. But the fear remained the same. That night, lying in the narrow bed, Clara listened to the sounds of the ranch settling for sleep. Boots on floorboards, doors closing, the occasional bark of a dog. The house creaked and groaned around her like a living thing. She thought of the letter that had brought her here, of the fool's hope that had made her answer it. A new start. She'd told herself, a chance to be something other than a victim. But as sleep finally claimed her, Clara knew the truth. She'd simply traded one prison for another. The bars were made of mountains instead of memories, but they held her just as tight, in her dreams. Wolves howled closer and closer, and dark-haired men with gentle hands moved like shadows at the edge of her vision, always just out of reach. The days blended into one another, each as gray and cold as the last. Clara learned the rhythms of the ranch quickly. Boone expected efficiency, not warmth. She rose before dawn to help Cookie prepare breakfast for the hands, served Boone his meals in silence, and retired to her room each night with relief that another day had passed without incident. But the bruises on her heart began to ache in new ways. Sometimes, when Boone gripped her wrist to make a point, Clara's body would freeze, transported back to those terrible nights in Topeka. She'd learned to hide the flinching, to keep her face smooth as stone. But inside, the old wounds tore open again and again. It was the third morning when she first spoke to Eli Ward. Clara was in the barn, collecting eggs from the few hens they kept, when a shadow fell across the doorway. She turned, basket in hand, to find the tall cowboy from her first day standing there. Up close, she could see what Boone had meant about Indian blood. Something in the angle of his cheekbones, the deep bronze of his skin even in winter. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Didn't mean to startle you?" His voice surprised her. Where Boone's words came out like hammers on anvils, Eli's were soft, almost musical. There was a careful quality to how he spoke, as if each word had been considered before release. "You didn't," Clara lied, though her heart still raced. "I was just finishing." Eli stepped aside to let her pass. But Clara hesitated. This was breaking Boone's rules. She knew, but something made her pause. "You're Mr. Ward?" A flicker of surprise crossed his features. "Yes, ma'am, Eli Ward. Mr. Riker mentioned you." Clara watched his face carefully. "He said you handle the horses." "Among other things." Eli's dark eyes held hers for a moment before dropping. "I should let you get back, Mr. Riker doesn't like—" "I know what Mr. Riker doesn't like," Clara said, sharper than intended. She softened her tone. "Thank you for your courtesy, Mr. Ward." She swept past him, but not before catching the flash of understanding in his eyes. He knew, somehow, this quiet man knew what kind of fear she carried. That evening, Boone's hands were rougher than usual as he pulled her close in the parlor. "Judge Kelly sends word he'll be here Thursday instead of Friday," he said, his breath hot against her ear. 3 more days, and you'll be mine proper." Clara stood rigid in his embrace, enduring the possession in his touch. When he finally released her, she saw Eli through the window, checking the horses for the night. Their eyes met briefly before Eli turned away. "You were talking to Ward today." Boone said it wasn't a question. Clara's blood chilled. "He was in the barn when I collected eggs. We exchanged pleasantries. Nothing more." Boone's hand shot out, gripping her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I don't like repeating myself. Woman, you stay away from him. That half-breed has ideas, thinks because his mother was some chief's daughter. He's better than a hired hand. I won't have my wife giving him more notions." "I understand," Clara whispered. "Do you—" Boone's grip tightened, and Clara saw James in his eyes, the same rage, the same need to break things smaller than himself. "Because if I see you near him again, there'll be consequences. For both of you." That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind howl through the passes. Her jaw ached where Boone had held it, and she knew there would be bruises by morning, the first of many. No doubt, she'd escaped nothing. The geography had changed, but the trap remained the same. Unable to sleep, she crept to the window. The moon was full, casting silver light across the snow-covered ground. Movement caught her eye, a figure by the water pump. Eli stood there, shirtless despite the cold, washing. Clara knew she should look away, but something held her. In the moonlight, she could see scars across his back, old ones, white against his dark skin. He moved carefully, like someone accustomed to old pain. When he turned to reach for his shirt, Clara gasped softly. More scars marked his chest, and one ran dangerously close to his heart, as if he'd hurt her. Eli looked up at her window. Clara didn't step back this time. They stood frozen, separated by walls and rules and the threat of violence, but connected by something neither could name. Finally. Eli pulled on his shirt and disappeared into the bunkhouse. The next day, Clara found small kindnesses appearing in her life. The eggs were already collected when she reached the barn. Fresh water had been drawn for the kitchen. The wood box beside the stove was full. She never saw Eli do these things, but she knew. Boone noticed her improved efficiency and grew suspicious. That night, he tested her, sending her to the barn after supper for a forgotten tool. Clara went, knowing it was a trap but having no choice. The barn was dark, full of shadows and the warm smell of horses. Clara found the lantern and lit it with shaking hands. "You shouldn't be here." She spun around. Eli stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the night sky. "Mr. Riker sent me for a—" "He's watching from the house," Eli said quietly. "Take the hoof pick from the third stall and go. Quickly." Clara found the tool and turned to leave, but Eli's voice stopped her. "Are you hurt?" The question, asked so gently, nearly broke her. No more than usual. She whispered, "After you're married." Eli paused, choosing his words. "It will get worse. Men like him, they don't change. They just find new ways to—" He stopped. "I'm sorry. It's not my place." "No," Clara said, surprising herself. "It's kind to be seen. I mean, it's been a long time since anyone—" She couldn't finish. "Go," Eli said urgently, "before he comes looking." Clara fled back to the house, where Boone waited with calculating eyes. He took the hoof pick, examined it, then nodded. "Good," was all he said. But his smile promised darker tests to come. Thursday arrived with a blizzard that blocked the passes. Judge Kelly sent word he couldn't make it until the weather cleared. Boone's fury was terrible. He threw chairs, broke dishes, and when Cookie spilled coffee at supper, he backhanded the old man hard enough to draw blood. Clara sat frozen through it all, recognizing the pattern. James had been like this too, violence building like steam in a kettle until it had to escape. She knew what came next, knew there was nowhere to run. That night, Boone came to her room. Clara heard his heavy steps on the stairs, the pause outside her door. The handle turned slowly. "The judge may not be here," he said, swaying slightly in the doorway. He'd been drinking. "But what difference does paper make? You're mine already." "Please," Clara said, backing toward the window. "The wedding is soon—" "Tired of waiting." Boone advanced, and Clara saw her death in his eyes. Not tonight, perhaps, but soon. Men like him didn't know when to stop. A crash from downstairs made Boone pause. Shouting erupted, something about horses loose in the storm. Cursing, Boone turned away. "This isn't over," he promised, then thundered back downstairs. Clara collapsed on her bed, shaking. Through her window, she caught a glimpse of movement in the barn. Eli was herding the horses back inside, but she'd seen him release them. He'd saved her, risked his position, maybe his life, for her. The next morning, Boone's rage had cold purpose. At breakfast, he announced that Eli would be flogged for negligence. Letting the horses escape could have killed valuable stock. "No," Clara said before she could stop herself. Boone's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" It was the storm. Clara said desperately, "The wind. I heard it blow the barn door open. It wasn't anyone's fault." Defending him, Boone's voice was deadly quiet. "After I warned you." He stood slowly, and Clara knew she'd made a terrible mistake. But before Boone could move, Eli appeared in the doorway. "She's right," Eli said calmly. "I checked the latch myself before turning in. The wood's old, swollen with moisture. It gave way in the wind." Boone looked between them, his face darkening. "Both of you, outside, now!" In the yard, the other hands gathered in a silent circle. Boone grabbed a horsewhip from the barn wall. "Strip," he ordered Eli. "No." Clara stepped forward. "Please, Mr. Riker." It was an accident, Boone backhanded her casually, sending her sprawling in the mud. "That's for questioning me." He turned back to Eli. "Strip, or I'll do it myself and add 20 lashes." Eli pulled off his shirt, revealing the scars Clara had glimpsed before. He walked to the hitching post and gripped it with both hands. The first crack of the whip made Clara flinch. The second drew blood. By the fifth, she was sobbing, but Eli never made a sound, just stood there taking each blow with terrible dignity. When it was over, 15 lashes that left his back a ruin, Boone threw down the whip. "Let that be a lesson," he said to the assembled men. "Anyone else wants to test me, they'll get worse." He grabbed Clara's arm, hauling her to her feet. "As for you, wife-to-be, you'll watch me do worse than this if you ever defend another man again." He dragged her toward the house, but Clara looked back once. Eli was still standing, blood running down his back, but his eyes found hers. In them, she saw not pain but promise, though what he promised, she couldn't say. The nights that followed were the longest Clara had ever known. Boone kept her locked in a room, bringing meals himself, watching her eat with cold satisfaction. Through her window, she could see the ranch continuing its business, but Eli was nowhere to be seen. on the third night, when exhaustion finally claimed her. Clara woke to a soft tapping at her window, heart racing. She crept over to find Eli balanced on the roof's edge, his face drawn with pain but determined. "Don't open it," he whispered through the glass. "Just listen." Clara pressed her palm against the cold window, matching where his hand rested on the other side. "I'm leaving at first light," Eli said. "Heading north to Montana. Come with me. He'll hunt us down." Clara whispered back. "Kill us both. Maybe, but staying here will kill you sure as any bullet." Eli's dark eyes held hers. "I've got money saved. We can make it to Canada if we're smart about it." "Why?" Clara had to ask. "Why risk this for me?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. "My mother loved a white man once. They tried to make it work, tried to follow the rules. The rules killed them both anyway." He shifted, wincing. Sometimes the only choice is to break free or break apart. Before Clara could respond, a door slammed downstairs. Eli melted back into the shadows just as Boone's heavy tread started up the stairs. Clara dove back into bed, feigning sleep, but her mind raced. Leave? The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The next days passed in a blur. The judge finally arrived, the passes having cleared, and wedding preparations began. Clara moved through them like a ghost, nodding when spoken to, trying on the dress Boone had ordered from Denver, white satin that felt like a shroud. But Eli hadn't left. She'd see him sometimes, working with the horses, moving stiffly from his healing wounds. He never looked at her directly when others were around, but she felt his awareness like a physical thing. The night before the wedding, Clara couldn't bear her room any longer. She waited until the house settled into sleep, then crept downstairs and out the back door. The cold hit her like a slap, but she pressed on, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name. She found Eli in the hay barn, sitting on a bale with his shirt off, trying to treat the wounds on his back. Some had healed poorly, still angry and weeping. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning around. "Neither should you. You said you were leaving." "I was." Eli finally faced her, and Clara saw the exhaustion written in every line of his body. "Couldn't do it. Couldn't leave you here with him?" Clara moved closer, drawn by something stronger than sense. "Let me help." He tensed as she took the cloth from his hand, but didn't pull away. Clara worked in silence, cleaning the wounds as gently as she could. This close, she could smell sage and leather on his skin, could feel the heat radiating from him despite the cold. "My husband used to beat me," she heard herself say. "James!" He'd drink and rage and then cry after, swear it would never happen again. It always did. Her hand stilled on Eli's back. "The night he died, he'd been hitting me for hours. Something in my body just gave up, started bleeding where a baby should have been growing. He went for another bottle while I lay there dying, but his heart gave out first. Everybody said it was the fever that took him. Nobody questioned the good widow's grief." Eli turned slowly to face her. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For all of it. I thought coming here would be different." Clara continued, tears flowing freely now. "A new start. But I just found another James, didn't I? Another man who sees breaking things as his right." "Hey," Eli said softly, reaching up to wipe her tears with his thumb. "You're not broken. Bent maybe, scarred surely, but not broken. Broken things don't fight as hard as you do." His touch was so gentle, so different from any she'd known, that Clara found herself leaning into it. "I don't know how to stop being afraid." "You don't stop," Eli said. "You just choose what's worth doing despite the fear." They sat in silence for a moment, his hand still cupping her face. Then, as if drawn by the same invisible thread, they moved together. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. Clara answered by pressing closer, her hands finding his shoulders, careful of his wounds. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is dangerous," Clara whispered. "Everything worth doing is—" Eli replied. He stood, pulling her up with him. "There's a place I want to show you. Will you come?" Against every rational thought, Clara nodded. Eli saddled 2 horses quickly, throwing blankets over their backs to muffle the sound. They rode out into the moonlit night, past the boundaries of the ranch, into the wild country beyond. He led her to a sheltered grove beside a half-frozen stream. Ancient cottonwoods formed a natural cathedral, their branches blocking out most of the sky. In the center was a small clearing with a fire ring made of stones. "My mother's people used to camp here," Eli said, dismounting. "Before the ranch, before the wars, it's peaceful." He built a small fire while Clara stood at the grove's edge, marveling at how different the world looked beyond Boone's fences. The mountains seemed protective rather than imprisoning, the stars closer and kinder. "Tell me about her," Clara said, settling beside the fire. "Your mother." Eli stared into the flames. Her name was Sarah Singing Bird, daughter of a Cheyenne peace chief. She fell in love with my father when he was scouting for the army, before they made such things illegal. They tried to live in town, but he shrugged. "You can imagine. He died protecting her from a mob. She lived long enough to see me grown, then followed him." "Is that how you got the scars?" "Some of them. The rest came from trying to be white enough for the whites, Indian enough for the Indians. Turns out you can't be enough for anyone but yourself." Clara watched the firelight play across his features. "Is that why you stay? At the ranch? I mean, you could go anywhere. Could I?" Eli smiled sadly. "A half-breed cowboy with no family name. Where exactly would I be welcome?" He looked at her. "Besides, lately I've had a reason to stay." The weight of his words settled between them. Clara knew she should protest, should remind him of all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she moved closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "I used to dream about being free," she said. "Now I don't even remember what that means." "It means this," Eli said softly. "Choosing where to be, who to be with. No one's hands on you but who you want." He turned to look at her. "It means being able to leave when staying would kill you." "Is that what you're asking me to do? Leave?" "I'm asking you to live," Eli said. "Whatever that looks like for you." Clara lifted her head to study his face. In the firelight, she could see past the careful control to the man beneath. Lonely, scarred, but still hoping, still fighting. "I'm getting married tomorrow," she said. "I know. Boone will never let me go." "I know that too. So what are you offering?" Eli Ward. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "A chance. Just a chance. I've got $300 saved. There's a train in Pueblo that goes to Denver, then north. We could be in Montana territory in a week, Canada in 2, start over where nobody knows us. And if he catches us, then we die free instead of living caged." Clara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice. Stay and endure certain slow death, or run and risk a quick one. When she opened them again, Eli was watching her with infinite patience. "After the ceremony," she said finally, "he'll drink heavy at the celebration. We could slip away in the confusion." Hope flared in Eli's eyes. "You mean it?" Instead of answering, Clara kissed him. This time there was nothing tentative about it. She poured all her fear and longing into the contact, and Eli responded with equal fervor. When his hands tangled in her hair, they were gentle still, treating her like something precious rather than possessed. They stayed by the fire until the eastern sky began to lighten. On the ride back, Clara memorized every detail: the way Eli sat his horse, the sound of water running under ice, the feeling of possibility expanding in her chest like dawn. At the ranch, they parted without words. Clara slipped back to her room just as Cookie began clanging the breakfast bell. She looked at the wedding dress hanging on her wardrobe and felt nothing but determination. Tonight, she thought, tonight, everything changes. From her window, she watched Eli head to the barn, moving easier now. He paused at the door and looked up at her, a promise in his eyes. Clara began to pack. The wedding passed like a fever dream. Clara stood before Judge Kelly in the parlor, Boone's massive frame beside her, and spoke vows that tasted like ash. The handful of neighboring ranchers who'd braved the weather to attend watched with knowing eyes. Everyone understood this was a business transaction, not a love match. Boone had spared no expense for the reception. Tables groaned under the weight of food Cookie had spent days preparing. Whiskey flowed freely, and the ranch hands were allowed to join the celebration after their work was done. Clara noticed Eli slip in with the others, keeping to the shadows near the door. "Smile, wife," Boone commanded, his hand heavy on her waist. "Don't want people thinking you're ungrateful." Clara forced her lips upward, playing her part. Inside, her heart hammered against her ribs. The small bag she'd packed was hidden beneath loose floorboards in her room. All she needed was the right moment. As the afternoon wore on and the whiskey took hold, Boone grew expansive, boasting about his plans for the ranch, for the sons Clara would give him. His grip on her gradually loosened as he focused on impressing the other ranchers. Clara seized her chance. "I need some air," she murmured. "The smoke." Boone waved her away, already deep in conversation about cattle prices. Clara slipped out the back door, gasping as the cold hit her. The sun was setting, painting the mountains blood red. She hurried toward the barn, but a hand caught her arm. She spun, terrified it was Boone, but found herself looking at Silas, the old foreman. "Dangerous night for a walk, Mrs. Riker," he said quietly. I know what you need." Silas glanced around, then pressed something into her hand. A key. "Tack room. There's a horse saddled and supplies in the bags. Eli's waiting by the eastern trail." Clara stared at him in shock. "Why?" "Been here 20 years. Seen what Boone does to things he owns." Silas's weathered face was grim. "That boy's mother saved my life once. Figure I owe her son a kindness. Now go, before someone notices." Clara ran in the tack room. She found her traveling clothes laid out and changed quickly, stuffing the wedding dress into a corner. The mare waiting for her was steady and calm, laden with saddlebags. She led the horse out the back way, moving as quietly as possible. The celebration noise from the house covered the sound of hooves on frozen ground. At the eastern trail, a shadow separated from the trees. "Thought you might have changed your mind," Eli said softly. "Never." Clara swung up into the saddle. "Which way?" "North through the canyon." "It's treacherous in the dark, but they won't expect us to take it." They rode in silence, picking their way carefully along the narrow trail. Clara's hands trembled on the reins, but not from cold. Every snapping twig made her think of pursuit. Every owl call sounded like Boone's shout. An hour passed. Then 2. The canyon walls rose around them, blocking out the stars. Just when Clara thought they might have actually escaped, Eli held up a hand. "Listen." At first, she heard nothing. Then, hoofbeats. Multiple horses, riding hard. "He knows." Clara breathed. "This way." Eli turned his horse off the trail, plunging into the forest. Clara followed, branches tearing at her clothes. Behind them, the hoofbeats grew louder. They rode desperately through the trees, trying to lose their pursuers in the darkness. But Boone knew this land, and his men were experienced trackers. The sounds of pursuit never faded. "There!" someone shouted. A gunshot cracked through the night, the bullet whining past Clara's head. "Keep riding!" Eli yelled. They burst into a clearing and Clara's heart sank. A sheer cliff face blocked their path. They were trapped. "The cave," Eli said, pointing to a dark opening in the rock. "We can defend it." They dismounted, and Eli slapped the horses' rumps, sending them running. He grabbed the supplies and Clara's hand, pulling her toward the cave. They'd barely made it inside when Boone and 5 men rode into the clearing. "I know you're in there," Boone's voice echoed off the rocks. "Come out now, and I might let Ward live." Eli pushed Clara deeper into the cave, then positioned himself at the entrance. He had his rifle, but against 6 men, it wouldn't last long. "You took something that belongs to me. Breed." Boone called. "That's theft in any court. She's not property." Eli called back. "She's a person." Boone's laugh was ugly. "She's whatever I say she is. I paid for her fair and square. Now send her out, or things get unpleasant." Clara touched Eli's shoulder. Maybe I should... No. His voice was fierce. You go back. You're dead. Maybe not tonight, but soon. So what do we do? Eli turned to look at her, and in the darkness, she could barely make out his features. You remember what I said about broken things? That I'm not one. That's right. So we don't break now. He cupped her face gently. Whatever happens, it was worth it. You understand? These hours of freedom with you were worth whatever comes. Tears ran down Clara's cheeks. Don't talk like we're already dead. We're not, but I need you to know. He was cut off by another gunshot, this one ricocheting inside the cave. Last chance, Boone yelled. Eli kissed Clara hard, pouring a lifetime of words into the contact. Then he pulled away. There's a passage in the back, leads out the other side of the hill. Take it and run. Not without you. Clara! No! She gripped his shirt. We go together or not at all. Before he could argue, light flooded the cave. The men had brought torches. Clara could see Boone's face now, twisted with rage. Touching, he snarled. The breed and the whore. Should have known you'd spread your legs for the first man who looked at you soft. Watch your mouth, Eli warned, raising his rifle. Or what? You'll shoot me? Boone spread his arms wide. Go ahead. My men will cut you down before you can reload. And then, his eyes found Clara. Then I'll take my time teaching my wife about respect. Clara felt something shift inside her, some last wall crumbling. She'd spent so long being afraid, so long letting fear drive her choices. But standing here, with Eli ready to die for her freedom, she realized the fear had already taken everything it could. I'm not your wife, she said, stepping out from behind Eli. The marriage isn't valid. Boone's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I lied. The words came out steady, strong. I'm already married. My husband isn't dead. I ran away from him, just like I'm running from you. It wasn't true, but Clara saw the doubt flicker in Boone's eyes. In the territories, marriage law was complex and often contradictory. You're lying, Boone said, but uncertainty colored his voice. Am I? Send a telegram to Topeka. Ask about James Bellamy. Ask if he's reported a missing wife. Clara stepped closer to the cave entrance. You married a woman who belongs to another man. Boone, what will your respectable neighbors think about that? Shut your mouth. What will they say when they learn you've been bedding another man's wife? Your reputation, your standing, all of it ruined because you couldn't be bothered to verify a mail-order bride's story. Boone's face had gone purple with rage. Even if that's true, you're still a thief and he's still a dead man. Maybe, Clara said. But you'll have to explain to Judge Kelly why you killed 2 people over an invalid marriage. Why you couldn't handle this legally. She saw the calculation in Boone's eyes. His reputation mattered more to him than anything. It was why he'd wanted a wife in the first place. The story would spread, twisted and embellished with each telling. Boss, one of his men said nervously. Maybe we should... Shut up, Boone snapped. He stared at Clara for a long moment, then spat on the ground. You've got 1 hour. If I can still see you after that, legal or not, I'll kill you both. He turned his horse sharply and rode away, his men following reluctantly. Clara's knees gave out, and Eli caught her before she hit the ground. That was brilliant, he breathed. But he'll check your story. Then we'd better be in Canada before he does. Clara managed a shaky smile. Still want to run away with a lying woman? Eli kissed her forehead. More than ever. They retrieved their horses and rode through the night, pushing hard toward the northern territories. As dawn broke over the mountains, Clara looked back once at the land she was leaving behind. Then she turned her face forward, toward Eli, toward freedom, toward a future written by their own hands. The fear was still there, might always be there, but it no longer owned her. She owned herself. And that was a freedom worth any risk. They rode hard for 3 days, stopping only when the horses demanded rest. The mountain passes gave way to high plains, the landscape opening up like a promise. Clara had never seen so much sky. Endless blue stretching from horizon to horizon. On the fourth night, exhausted and saddle-sore, they finally stopped at a trading post near the Montana border. The proprietor, a French-Canadian named Dubois, asked no questions when Eli paid for a room and supplies with cash. Clara collapsed on the narrow bed, every muscle screaming. She'd never ridden so far or so hard in her life. Eli sat on the floor beside her, keeping watch even here. "You should sleep," Clara murmured. "Soon." He was cleaning his rifle, movements automatic. "Need to be sure we weren't followed." Clara studied his profile in the lamplight. Days of hard travel had worn them both down, but there was something different about Eli now, a looseness to his shoulders, as if he too had left chains behind in Colorado. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Leaving everything for this?" Eli set aside the rifle and turned to her. "Only thing I regret is not speaking sooner, watching him hurt you those weeks. You couldn't have done anything then. Could have tried." Clara reached out, running her fingers through his dusty hair. "We're here now. That's what matters." He caught her hand, pressing it to his cheek. The gesture was so tender it made her throat tight. They stayed like that for a long moment, neither speaking, both aware they'd crossed into new territory that had nothing to do with geography. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Eli was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Who is it?" "Dubois. Got news you should hear." Eli glanced at Clara, then cracked the door. The proprietor's weathered face was grim. "Riders came through an hour ago, asking about a breed and a white woman. I told them nothing, but they're camping 5 miles south. Thought you should know." Clara's blood ran cold. Boone hadn't given up after all. "How many?" Eli asked. 4, well armed." Dubois hesitated. "There's another way north, harder route, through Blackfoot territory. Most whites won't risk it, but I'm not most whites." Eli finished. "Tell me." Dubois sketched a rough map, marking water sources and landmarks. "My wife's people are up that way. Tell them I sent you. They might help, or they might not. Been bad blood since the army came through last spring. We'll take our chances." Eli handed him more coins. "You never saw us." "Saw who?" Dubois pocketed the money and left. They packed quickly, Clara's hands shaking with renewed fear, just when she'd begun to believe they might actually escape. Boone's shadow fell over them again. "Hey." Eli caught her hands, stilling them. "Look at me." She did, finding steadiness in his dark eyes. "We're going to make it," he said firmly. "I promise you. Don't make promises you can't keep." "I don't." He cupped her face. "Trust me?" Despite everything, Clara found herself nodding. She did trust him, maybe the first man she'd ever truly trusted. They slipped out the back way, leading their horses until they were well clear of the trading post. The moon was new, offering little light, but Eli navigated as if he could see in the dark. Clara followed, placing her faith in his knowledge and instincts. The new route was brutal. They climbed into mountains that made the Colorado Rockies look gentle, following game trails barely wide enough for the horses. Snow began falling near dawn, white curtains that hid their tracks but also obscured the path. "There," Eli pointed to a sheltered overhang. "We'll rest a few hours." They huddled together under the rock, sharing body heat and what little food they had. Clara dozed fitfully, starting awake at every sound. Eli never slept, keeping watch with the patience of a man accustomed to being hunted. On the second day in the mountains, they encountered the Blackfoot. The warriors appeared like ghosts from the snow, surrounding them before Clara even knew they were there. Eli raised his hands slowly, speaking in a language Clara didn't understand. The lead warrior, his face painted for war, responded sharply. Clara's heart pounded as the conversation continued. She caught Dubois' name, saw the warrior's expressions shift from hostile to wary. Finally, the leader gestured northward and spoke what sounded like directions. "They'll let us pass," Eli translated quietly. "But we need to move quickly. There's a war party heading south, and they don't want us here when they return." They rode on, the warriors vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. Clara wanted to ask what Eli had said, how he'd known their language, but there was no time. They had to keep moving. That night, sheltered in a cave Eli somehow found in the white blindness of the storm, Clara finally broke. "I can't," she gasped, shaking uncontrollably. "I can't keep running. I'm not strong enough." "Yes, you are." Eli pulled her against him, wrapping them both in every blanket they had. "You're the strongest person I know." "I'm terrified," Clara admitted into his chest. "Every moment, I'm terrified he'll find us, that this will all be for nothing. Fear's just wisdom in the face of danger." Eli murmured, "Being scared doesn't make you weak." "Giving up would—" "Have you ever wanted to give up?" Eli was quiet for a long time. "After my mother died, yes, wanted to follow her. Figured there was nothing left here worth staying for. Then I remembered what she used to say, that we don't live for ourselves alone. We live for the ones who'll come after, to make their path a little easier." "Is that why you helped me? For the ones who'll come after?" "No." His arms tightened around her. "I helped you because the first time I saw you, you looked like you were drowning on dry land, and I knew that feeling so well, I couldn't walk away." Clara lifted her head to look at him. In the faint light from their small fire, his features were softened, younger looking. "I'm not drowning now," she whispered. "No? No, now I'm learning to swim." The kiss was inevitable, born of exhaustion and fear and the desperate need for human connection. But what followed was deliberate, a choice made with eyes wide open. In the circle of warmth they'd created against the killing cold, Clara rediscovered her body as something more than a vessel for pain. Eli's hands were reverent, tracing scars both visible and hidden. When old memories threatened to intrude, James's roughness, Boone's possession, Eli's gentleness called her back. He waited, always, for her permission, her guidance. "Show me," he whispered against her throat. "Show me what you want." It was a power Clara had never been offered before, the power to direct, to choose, to stop or continue as she wished. She used it tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as Eli responded to every cue, every wordless request. When they came together at last, it was with a tenderness that made Clara weep, not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming realization that this was what it was supposed to be. Two people choosing each other, giving and receiving in equal measure. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the wind howl outside their shelter. Clara traced patterns on Eli's chest, marveling at the solid reality of him. "What happens when we reach Canada?" she asked. "We disappear," Eli said simply. "New names, new lives, plenty of work for a man who knows horses and a woman who's not afraid of hard living. And us, what are we to each other there?" Eli caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "Whatever you want us to be, husband and wife. If you'll have me, partners. If that's all you're ready for. I'm not looking to own you, Clara, just to stand beside you." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't even know who I am without the fear. Then we'll find out together." They dozed fitfully until dawn, when the storm finally broke. Emerging from the cave, Clara gasped at the transformed landscape, pristine white under a brilliant blue sky. The danger beautiful in its indifference. "2 more days," Eli said, studying the horizon. 3 at most, and we'll be across the border. And Boone? Won't follow us into Canada. Too much risk, not enough reward. He'll rage and threaten, maybe put out a bounty. But eventually he'll find another woman to torment. Clara hoped Eli was right, but the knot of fear in her stomach remained. They'd come so far, but freedom still felt fragile as spun glass, ready to shatter at the first rough touch. "Ready?" Eli asked, already saddling the horses. Clara took one last look at the cave that had sheltered them, then squared her shoulders. "Ready." They rode on into the white morning, 2 small figures against the vastness of the mountains. Behind them, their tracks filled with fresh snow, erasing all sign of their passage. Ahead lay the border, And beyond that, a life yet to be written. The fever struck Clara on their last day in the mountains. One moment she was riding steady. The next, she was slumping forward, barely catching herself on the saddle horn. "Clara?" Eli was beside her instantly, one hand on her burning forehead. "How long have you been feeling ill?" "Since morning," she admitted through chattering teeth. "Thought it was just the cold." Eli cursed softly. They were still a day's ride from any settlement, exposed on the mountain with the winter closing in. He scanned the landscape, then made a decision. "There's an old mission station a few miles west, abandoned, but it'll have shelter." Clara tried to protest. They needed to keep moving, needed to reach Canada, but the words wouldn't come. Her body felt like it was burning and freezing at once, every breath a struggle. The next hours blurred together. Eli leading her horse, his voice a constant comfort through the haze, being lifted down, carried through a doorway, darkness and warmth and the musty smell of long-abandoned places. When Clara's vision cleared, she found herself lying on a narrow cot in what had once been a chapel. Faded religious paintings looked down from the walls, and a wooden cross hung askew above the altar. Eli knelt beside her, wringing out a cloth in melted snow. "The fever's getting worse," he said quietly, pressing the cool fabric to her forehead. "I need to go find help." "No." Clara caught his hand weakly. "Don't leave me. I won't be long. There's a Métis settlement about 10 miles north. They'll have medicine." "Boone, won't find you here. No one knows about this place except the old missionaries." He squeezed her hand. "I'll bar the door. You'll be safe." Clara wanted to argue more, but darkness was pulling at her. The last thing she saw was Eli's face, tight with worry, before the fever dreams claimed her. She dreamed of fire and ice, of James's fists and Boone's hands, of her lost child crying somewhere she couldn't reach. But through it all, a voice called her back, gentle, patient, refusing to let her drift away. Clara woke to find sunlight streaming through broken windows, and an elderly woman sitting beside her bed. The woman's face was weathered but kind, marked by years of prairie living. "Ah, you returned to us," she said in accented English. "Your man, he was very worried." "Eli." Clara's voice came out as a croak. "Resting." The woman gestured to where Eli slept, slumped in a chair, still within arm's reach of Clara's cot. "He hasn't left your side in 3 days, except when I force him to eat." 3 days. They'd lost 3 days. "I'm Mary LaRoche," the woman continued, helping Clara sit up. "My husband and I, we help at the Métis settlement. You're Eli. He rode through a blizzard to find us, nearly killed himself and his horse." Clara looked at Eli, noting the exhaustion etched into his features even in sleep. He'd risked everything to save her. Again. "The sickness?" Clara asked. "Mountain fever. Happens sometimes to newcomers." "You're past the worst now, but you'll be weak for a while." Mary studied her shrewdly. "You're running from something." It wasn't a question. Clara nodded carefully. "My husband ran once too," Mary said. "From Quebec, from a marriage his family arranged. I was the scandal, Indian blood. You see, we've been running 40 years now." She smiled. "Sometimes running is the only way to find home." Eli stirred then, his eyes snapping open. The relief on his face when he saw Clara awake made her heart clench. "Hey," he said softly, moving to kneel beside the cot. "You scared me." "Sorry." Clara touched his face, feeling several days' worth of stubble. "You look terrible. You look beautiful." He caught her hand, pressing it to his cheek. "Mary says you'll be all right. We can move on when you're stronger." "About that," Mary interrupted. "There's been talk at the settlement, riders asking questions. American lawmen, they say, but—" She shrugged. "In my experience, lawmen don't offer gold for information." Clara's heart sank. Even here, Boone's reach extended. "How long do we have?" Eli asked. "Few days, maybe less. They're checking all the settlements along the border." Mary stood. "But there's another way. My nephew runs freight to Fort Edmonton. You could travel with his crew, hidden in the wagons. It's not comfortable, but it's safe. We're grateful, Eli said. For everything. Mary waved him off. We protect our own out here, and you, she looked at Clara meaningfully. You're one of us now, a woman who chooses her own path. She left them medicine and food, promising her nephew would come in 2 days. When she'd gone, Clara and Eli sat in silence, hands entwined. I'm sorry, Clara said finally. If I hadn't gotten sick. Don't. Eli's voice was fierce. None of this is your fault. Not the running, not the fear, none of it. I'm so tired of being afraid. Clara admitted. I thought it would end when we left, but it follows us. Fears like that, Eli said. But look how far we've come. Look what we've survived. Each day gets a little easier. That night, Clara insisted on moving to the floor beside Eli's bedroll. They lay together in the abandoned chapel, moonlight falling through the broken roof like a blessing. Clara told him things she'd never spoken aloud, about the baby she'd lost, about the nights she'd prayed for death, about the guilt of surviving when so many didn't. Eli listened without judgment, offering his own stories in return. His mother's laughter, his father's books, the day he'd found them both dead and had to bury them alone at 15. The years of drifting until Boone's Ranch, where he'd thought he could disappear into work and silence. Then you arrived, he said, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't watch another person break under his hands. I wasn't the first. No. But you were the first who looked like you might fight back, given half a chance. He pulled her closer. I wanted to be that chance. Mary's nephew arrived as promised, a jovial man named Pierre who asked no questions about his hidden passengers. They traveled by night, concealed among flour sacks and trade goods, emerging only when Pierre deemed it safe. The journey to Fort Edmonton took 5 days. 5 days of cramped quarters and constant vigilance, but also 5 days of whispered conversations and shared dreams. Clara learned that Eli wanted to raise horses someday, breed them for endurance rather than speed. Eli learned that Clara had once dreamed of teaching, of giving children the education she'd barely received. Maybe we can do both, Clara suggested during one of their brief stops. A ranch with a schoolhouse, somewhere remote enough to be safe but close enough to help others. I'd like that, Eli said. Building something instead of running from it. Aw. Fort Edmonton rose from the prairie like a promise. The Hudson's Bay Company post was bustling with traders, trappers, and settlers, a place where mixed-blood couples were common enough to draw no special notice. Pierre knew a priest there, Father Matthias, who ran a small mission and asked few questions of those seeking sanctuary. Father Matthias was younger than Clara expected, with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers. He listened to their carefully edited story without comment, then offered them shelter in exchange for work, Eli with the horses, Clara helping with the mission's small school. You can stay as long as needed, he said, though I suspect you're not the staying kind, when you're ready to move on. I know people further north who can help. That night, in their small room behind the mission, Eli pulled something from his pack, a simple gold ring, worn smooth with age. It was my mother's, he said quietly. I know we can't marry proper, not with Boone's claim hanging over us, but... He met Clara's eyes. Would you wear it anyway? As a promise, if nothing else. Clara's throat was too tight for words. She held out her hand, letting Eli slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her. In my heart, you're already my husband, she whispered. Papers or no papers? And you're my wife, Eli replied. From the moment you chose to run with me. They made their own vows that night, witnessed only by moonlight and God. Simple promises to stand together, to choose each other daily, to build something worth having from the ashes of what they'd fled. Later, as Clara lay in Eli's arms listening to his heartbeat, she realized the fear had finally loosened its grip. It was still there, might always be there, but it no longer ruled her. She'd found something stronger, hope, and the man who'd shown her it was possible to heal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Word of Boone's search would spread. They'd have to move on eventually. Keep heading north until even his rage couldn't reach them. But tonight, they were safe. Tonight, they were home in each other. Clara twisted the ring on her finger, feeling its weight like an anchor. She'd been a Bellamy, almost been a Riker, but here in this moment, she was simply Clara, choosing her own name, her own path, her own love, and that was enough. Spring came late to Fort Edmonton, but when it arrived, it transformed the world. The snow melted into rivers of mud. Geese returned in great honking clouds, and Clara felt her spirit thaw along with the earth. She'd been teaching at the mission school for 3 months now, and the children had grown to love her gentle ways. Eli worked with the trading post's horses, earning respect for his skill and quiet competence. They'd built a life here, careful and small, but real. Then the letter came. Father Matthias handed it to Clara after morning lessons, his face grave. It arrived with a supply train from the south. Clara's hands trembled as she recognized the handwriting. Not Boone's, but Silas, the old foreman who'd helped them escape. She read quickly, blood draining from her face. "What is it?" Eli asked, finding her sitting on the mission steps. The letter crumpled in her lap. "Boone found out about my lie, about James being alive." Clara's voice was hollow. "He's put out wanted notices, murder and theft, says we killed one of his men during our escape and stole money from his safe. That's not true. Doesn't matter. He's offered a $1,000 bounty, dead or alive." Clara looked up at him, eyes filled with tears. "We have to run again." Eli sat beside her, pulling her close. "Where can we go? His reach." "Silas says there's more. Boone's hired Pinkerton agents, professional trackers. They'll find us eventually, even here." They sat in silence, watching the children play in the muddy yard. Clara had let herself believe they were safe, let herself dream of a future. Now that dream crumbled like spring ice. "There is one option," Eli said slowly. "We go back." "What?" Clara pulled away to stare at him. "Not to stay, to fight, in court, legal-like. Silas could testify about what really happened. Others, too, maybe the hands who saw him beat you. You think they'd stand up to Boone? Risk their jobs, their lives? For justice? Maybe not. For you?" Eli touched her face gently. "You'd be surprised what people will risk for someone who showed them kindness." Clara wanted to believe him, but fear clawed at her throat. "And if we lose? If the court sides with him?" "Then at least we tried. At least we stood up instead of spending our whole lives running." That night, they talked until dawn. Father Matthias joined them, offering wisdom and warnings in equal measure. By morning, they'd made their decision. "We'll need allies." Clara said, "Witnesses, evidence, and a good lawyer." Father Matthias added, "I know a man in Denver, Marcus Webb. He's handled cases like this, women seeking freedom from cruel husbands. He might help." They spent 2 weeks preparing. Letters were sent carefully, through trusted channels. Eli reached out to old contacts, men he'd worked with who might speak truth. Clara wrote to women she'd known in Kansas, seeking character witnesses. The responses trickled in slowly. Some refused outright, too afraid of Boone's retribution. But others, surprising others, agreed. Cookie, beaten down but not broken, promised to testify about the violence he'd witnessed. 2 ranch hands who'd left Boone's employ offered support, even Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch, who'd seen Clara's bruises at the wedding, said she'd speak if called. "It's not much," Eli said, reviewing their witnesses. "It's more than I hoped for," Clara replied. "It's enough to try." They left Fort Edmonton on a bright May morning, traveling openly this time. No more hiding in wagons or skulking through shadows. They took the train when they could, riding when they couldn't, making their way back to the place they'd fled. In Denver, Marcus Webb proved to be a thin, earnest man with sharp eyes behind wire spectacles. He listened to their story without interruption, taking careful notes. "The murder charge is fabricated, clearly," he said when they finished. "No body, no missing man reported. That's easily disproven. The theft, did you take anything when you left? Just the horses, Eli admitted. And supplies. But I'd worked near 3 years without taking my full wages. Figured I was owed. We can work with that. The marriage issue is more complex. Webb studied Clara over his glasses. You were coerced? I was desperate. Clara said quietly. He knew it, used it. And the violence? You have witnesses to that. Clara nodded, unconsciously touching her jaw where bruises had long since faded. Several. Good. We'll petition the territorial court, seek an annulment based on coercion and fraud. He misrepresented himself in his letters. Yes, promised a partnership, not servitude. Yes. Then we have grounds. Webb leaned back. I won't lie to you. Boone Riker has influence, money. The law often bends for such men, but sometimes, justice has its day. The trial was set for late June in the county seat. As the date approached, Clara's fear grew. They stayed in a boarding house in town, Eli taking work at the livery to pay their way. Every shadow might hide a Pinkerton agent. Every stranger might bring word that Boone knew where they were. Then, a week before the trial, he found them. Clara was returning from the market when she saw him, Boone, standing bold as brass outside their boarding house. Her basket fell from nerveless fingers. Hello, wife, he said, his smile cold as winter wind. You've led me quite a chase. I'm not your wife. Clara was proud her voice didn't shake. And you can't touch me here. There are witnesses. Witnesses? Boone laughed. You think I care about witnesses? You think your toy lawyer and your breed lover can protect you from what's mine by right? I was never yours. Clara lifted her chin. I was never anyone's property. His face darkened. We'll see what the judge says about that. My judge, in my county, with my friends on the jury. He stepped closer, and Clara smelled whiskey on his breath. You should have stayed gone. Clara, now I have to make an example of you. Can't have other wives getting ideas. Is that a threat, Mr. Riker? Both Clara and Boone turned. Marcus Webb stood there, 2 deputies beside him, because threatening a witness is a serious crime. Boone's smile was all teeth. Just greeting my wayward wife, counselor, no law against that. Actually, there is. My client has filed for protection under the Territorial Women's Safety Act. You're to stay 100 yards away at all times. Webb handed Boone a paper. Violate this order, and you'll be jailed. For a moment, rage flashed naked across Boone's face. Then he controlled himself, taking the paper with exaggerated courtesy. See you in court, wife, he said to Clara. Both of you. His eyes found someone behind her, and Clara knew without turning that Eli had arrived. They watched him walk away. Swagger intact, but something uncertain in his shoulders. He'd expected to cow them with his presence. Instead, he'd found them ready to fight. You all right? Eli asked quietly, his hand finding Clara's elbow. Yes. And surprisingly, she was. He doesn't scare me anymore. He's just a man, a cruel, small man, but just a man. The trial began on a sweltering June day. The courthouse was packed. News of the mail-order bride fighting back had spread. Women filled the gallery, faces hard with their own memories. Men came too, some curious, some hostile, some quietly supportive. Boone's lawyer was everything Clara expected. Smooth, expensive, and ruthless. He painted her as a fortune hunter, a loose woman who'd seduced both employer and employee. He suggested she'd planned it all from the beginning. Answer the advertisement, entrap the wealthy rancher, run off with her lover and his money. But Webb was better. Piece by piece, he built the truth. Cookie testified about Boone's violence, voice shaking but determined. Mrs. Henderson described Clara's bruises, the fear in her eyes. The ranch hands spoke of what they'd seen and heard. Then Silas took the stand. The old foreman looked Boone in the eye as he testified. 20 years of loyalty set aside for truth. He told about Clara's terror, about Boone's threats, about helping them escape because he couldn't stand to see another woman die on that ranch. Another? Webb prompted gently. There were 2 before her. Silas said heavily. Mail-order brides who didn't last 6 months. One fell down the stairs. Other got trampled by a horse. Accidents. Mr. Riker said, "We all knew better." The courtroom erupted. Boone's lawyer objected frantically, but the damage was done. The judge, not Boone's friend after all, but a recent appointee from back east, allowed the testimony. When Clara took the stand, she spoke her truth simply. The desperation that drove her to answer the advertisement, the hope for a new life, the slow realization that she'd traded one prison for another, the violence, subtle at first, then blatant. "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Boone's lawyer demanded. "Where would I go?" Clara met the eyes of the women in the gallery. "I had no money, no family, no friends. He made sure of that. Isolated me, controlled me. Leaving meant risking death. Staying meant accepting it. Yet you did leave with Mr. Ward." "Yes." Clara's voice grew stronger. "Because he showed me I was worth saving. Because he risked everything to help me. Because sometimes the only choice is to run toward life, even if it means running through fire." Eli testified last, speaking plainly about what he'd witnessed and why he'd acted. When Boone's lawyer tried to paint him as a man stealing another's wife, Eli's response silenced the room. "You can't steal a person," he said quietly. "They're not property. Clara chose to leave. I just made sure she survived the choosing." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. 3 hours that felt like 3 years. When they returned, Clara gripped Eli's hand so tight her knuckles went white. "On the charge of murder," the foreman read, "we find the defendants not guilty." Clara sagged with relief, but it wasn't over. "On the charge of theft, we find Mr. Eli Ward not guilty, as wages owed exceed the value of goods taken." 2 down. On the matter of the marriage between Clara Bellamy and Boone Riker, we find grounds for annulment based on fraud and coercion. The marriage is declared invalid. The gallery erupted in cheers, women embracing, men nodding approval. But the foreman wasn't finished. "Furthermore, based on testimony heard, we recommend investigation into the deaths of 2 previous women at the Riker Ranch." Boone shot to his feet, face purple with rage, but the deputies were ready. As they escorted him out pending investigation, his eyes found Clara one last time. The look promised retribution, but Clara didn't flinch. His power over her was broken. On the courthouse steps, in the clean light of summer afternoon, Clara removed Boone's ring, the one she'd been forced to wear, and let it fall into the dust. Then she held up her left hand, where Eli's mother's ring caught the light. "Now it's official," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm free." The investigation into Boone Riker's past unraveled quickly. The sheriff, freed from Boone's influence by the court's mandate, found evidence of systematic abuse spanning years. The 2 women Silas had mentioned were exhumed, and the coroner's findings supported murder charges. Faced with mounting evidence and abandoned by his influential friends, Boone chose the coward's way out. A pistol in his study, a note confessing nothing but blaming everyone. Clara heard the news at the boarding house, Marcus Webb delivering it gently. She felt nothing, no triumph, no relief, just a hollow echo where fear used to live. "It's over," Webb said. "Truly over. His estate will be settled by the court. There are debts, but the ranch itself is valuable. As his legal widow, brief as it was, you have a claim." "I don't want it," Clara said immediately. "I want nothing from that place. Consider carefully," Webb advised. "That money could secure your future, both your futures." That night, Clara and Eli walked along the creek outside town, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. They'd spoken little since the trial, both processing the sudden shift from hunted to free. "What do we do now?" Clara asked. "We spent so long running. I don't know how to stop." Eli took her hand, thumb tracing circles on her palm. "We do what we planned. Find somewhere to build that life we talked about. The school, the horses. With what money? I've still got my savings, and there's work. Webb thinks I should claim part of Boone's estate." Eli was quiet for a moment. "What do you think?" "I think those women deserve justice, the ones before me." Clara turned to face him. "What if we took it and used it for something good? Something that would have made Boone rage?" A slow smile spread across Eli's face. "Tell me. A refuge for women like me, like them, somewhere safe to run to heal, to learn they're worth saving." Clara's words came faster as the idea took shape. "We could use the money to buy land somewhere remote but accessible, build not just our home but others, hire teachers, doctors maybe, give women the choices they never had." "That's beautiful," Eli said softly. "And you're right. Boone would hate every bit of it." The legal proceedings took months, but eventually, Clara was awarded a settlement. Not the full estate, but enough. She signed the papers as Clara Ward, having married Eli properly in a small ceremony with Webb and their boarding house landlady as witnesses. They found their land in the foothills of the Rockies, near a small town called Havens Grove, 160 acres of meadow and forest, with a clear stream running through it and mountain views that made Clara's heart soar. The seller, an elderly widow named Mrs. Parrish, knocked a third off the price when she heard their plans. "About time someone did something for the lost ones," she said fiercely. "You need anything, you ask. This town takes care of its own." The first building went up in autumn, their own small cabin. Simple but solid. Eli worked from dawn to dusk, joined by men from town who'd heard about the project. Clara organized, planned, wrote letters to churches and charities seeking support. By spring, 3 more cabins were complete, and the main lodge was framed. Word spread through networks Clara hadn't known existed, women helping women. Whispers of sanctuary passing from town to town. The first resident arrived on a rainy April morning. Anna, barely 18, bruised and pregnant, clutching a carpet bag and a crumpled paper with Clara's name. Clara settled her into a cabin, made tea, and listened to a story achingly familiar in its rhythms of control and violence. "You're safe here," Clara told her, meaning it down to her bones. "As long as you need—" More came. Sarah, escaping a father who'd tried to sell her. Margaret, whose husband's fists had finally gone too far. Ellen, cast out for refusing a marriage that would have killed her spirit. Each brought their own pain, their own strength. Clara taught letters and numbers in the main lodge. A doctor from town visited weekly. Eli trained the women in practical skills, riding, shooting, basic carpentry. Not to make them men, but to make them capable. "Independence is its own protection," he'd say, watching Margaret learn to handle a rifle. The work was hard, the days long, but Clara had never been happier. She woke each morning beside Eli, worked with purpose, fell asleep knowing she'd made a difference. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of expansion. More cabins, a proper schoolhouse, maybe even a small hospital. Then came the letter that changed everything again. Clara was teaching arithmetic when Eli brought it, his face carefully neutral. The return address was Fort Edmonton, Father Matthias. "My dear friends," Clara read aloud, "I hope this finds you well and thriving in your good work. I write with news that may interest you. A young woman has come to us seeking your whereabouts most urgently. She claims to be Eli's sister." The letter fell from Clara's numb fingers. Eli had gone very still. "You never mentioned a sister," Clara said softly. "I thought she was dead." His voice was rough. "When they killed our parents, I looked for her, but the soldiers said she'd been taken by relatives back east. I wrote, searched, but—" He shrugged helplessly. "After a while, I had to accept she was gone." According to Father Matthias, the sister, Rebecca, had spent years searching for Eli after aging out of the harsh boarding school where she'd been placed. She'd traced him to Boone's ranch, then to Fort Edmonton, following a trail of whispers and half-memories. "She's coming here." Clara finished reading. "Matthias gave her our direction. She should arrive within the month." Eli stood abruptly and walked out. Clara found him by the stream, skipping stones with mechanical precision. "I abandoned her," he said without turning. "Left a 10-year-old girl alone. You were 15. You thought she was dead." Clara wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You survived. Eli, that's all any of us can do. What if she hates me? What if—" "Then we'll face it together, like we always do." Rebecca arrived 3 weeks later on the afternoon stage. Clara and Eli waited at the depot, both nervous as new colts. When a young woman stepped down, tall, dark-haired, with Eli's same careful grace, Clara knew her immediately. Brother and sister stood frozen, separated by years and tragedy. Then Rebecca spoke, her voice carrying their mother's musical cadence. "You look like Papa," she said, "but you have Mama's way of standing, like you're ready to run or fight." "Becca?" Eli's voice broke on the childhood nickname. She nodded, tears streaming. "I've been looking for you for so long." They collided in an embrace that made Clara weep. All those years of loneliness, of believing themselves alone, ended in that moment. Rebecca stayed, of course. She fit into their work like a missing piece, teaching the younger women, sharing her own story of survival. She'd been trained as a nurse at the boarding school, one of the few useful things about that terrible place, and her skills proved invaluable. "We're building something important here," she said one evening, the three of them sitting on the lodge porch. "A place where broken people can become whole. We're all broken somehow." Clara said, "The trick is learning that broken doesn't mean worthless." As summer turned to autumn, Clara realized she'd missed her monthly courses. The doctor confirmed what she'd hardly dared hope. New life grew within her, properly planted this time, nurtured by love instead of fear. Eli's joy was incandescent. He built a cradle with his own hands, carved with horses and wildflowers. Rebecca knitted blankets while regaling them with embarrassing stories of Eli's childhood. The women at the sanctuary showered Clara with advice and gifts. On a snowy December night, with Rebecca attending and Eli holding her hand, Clara brought their daughter into the world. They named her Sarah Hope Ward. Sarah for Eli's mother, Hope for what she represented. "She's perfect," Eli whispered, cradling the baby with infinite tenderness. "She'll grow up free," Clara said fiercely, never knowing the fear we knew, always knowing her worth. As snow fell outside, blanketing their sanctuary in pristine white, Clara looked around the room, at her husband, her sister by choice, her daughter, the home they'd built for the lost and broken, and felt the last shadows of her old life fade away. She'd been Clara Bellamy, terrified and trapped. She'd almost been Clara Riker, a possession to be broken. But now she was Clara Ward, teacher, mother, survivor, builder of sanctuaries. The journey had nearly killed her, but it had also forged her into something stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. From the other cabins came the sound of laughter, women who'd found safety, found hope, found themselves. Tomorrow there would be more work, more challenges, more souls seeking sanctuary. But tonight, surrounded by love and warmth and possibility, Clara allowed herself this moment of perfect peace. Eli began to sing softly, a Cheyenne lullaby his mother had taught him. Rebecca joined in, harmonizing. Clara closed her eyes and listened, her heart so full it might burst. They'd run so far, fought so hard, lost and found so much, and in the end, they'd discovered the greatest truth of all, that love, real love, didn't cage or control or possess. It liberated, it healed, it transformed two broken people into something whole and beautiful and unbreakable. The storm that had brought them together had passed. Now, they were home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Friends, I hope Clara and Eli's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Leave a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just like the old frontier folks did. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of love, courage, and redemption in the American West. And don't be shy about sharing your thoughts. What part of the story resonated with you? Until we meet again around the campfire, Keep riding toward your own horizon. Happy trails.